We've just had read to you one of the most stock standard readings of the Gospels, accounts of the birth of Jesus. It dates the birth of Jesus to a particular Roman ruler, to a particular census that happened under that time in his government, of making sense of who was part of the Roman Empire. And we're taken to a little town in Bethlehem, and we're taken to a little outdoor part where there was no room else to be found. It's an interesting story. It's almost way too familiar, really. Us people in the West for long have looked on nativity scenes, have heard these stories, have had them narrated in kids' books so much that they kind of lack any punch anymore. How are you to make sense of them and their significance? To help you this evening, I've got a question. I wonder if you're a connoisseur of those exquisite movie genre movies known as the Christmas movie. You know, it's kind of like the hot chocolate with too much sugar of the movie genres. It's kind of like a quilt that's too hot on a summer's night. They're so popular that Hallmark makes about 40 of them every year. Every year. Extraordinary. As someone in the New York Times said, the bad Christmas movies' beats are so consistent, its twists so predictable, its acts and props so loyally really reused, it's easy to relax into its rhythms and just let it wash over you like a crackling fireplace in your living room. The plots of these movies are simple. You return home to some idyllic North American town. It's all snowy, lit up for the Christmas season, and you find a part of yourself you lost in the big city, and then you reconnect with an old flame, and you fall back in love. It's quite simple, really, and it always comes together. And friends, it works, doesn't it? Every time we watch them again and again and again. The same plot. And romance is always at the heart of them. It's really interesting, romance. And I think that is actually a great help to us, for whom Christmas and the scene of the manger has become too familiar. Romance is actually at the heart of Christmas. If you want to make sense of it, then romance is the way to go. Søren Kierkegaard, the great philosopher theologian, grew up in 19th century Copenhagen and was a bit of a Scrooge, really. He felt like Christmas had become too much about ginger nut biscuits and quiet angelic babies. And so he decided to retell the story of Christmas. And he told it a little something like this. There once was a queen who loved a poor, humble stable hand. The queen was a queen like no other. Every monarch in the land quivered before her. No one dared oppose her or breathe a word against her. She had the strength, the armies, the money to crush anyone. And yet this mighty queen had her heart melted by a humble, stable hand in a poor part of the kingdom, far off in the distance. But how could she declare her love for him? In an odd sort of way, her queenly position tied her hands. Say she summoned him to the palace from his little hamlet, and he came all the way up, and he walked in the front door, as massive as they were, and was crowned and robed and bejeweled. I mean, he wouldn't resist her. No one dared resist her. But would he love her? Would he be happy there? Or would he always grieve the life that he'd left behind? No. Well, suppose she rode down to him in her carriage with her banners above and her escort around and overwhelmed him. She didn't want a cringing subject. She wanted a lover. So alone she grappled with this sorrow in her heart, whether she could ever make the boy happy by marrying him, whether he could ever forget that she was a queen and he was nothing. The queen was convinced she could not elevate the boy, so she must instead descend. So she took off her crown, she took off her robes, her rings, her jewels. She took up a beggar's cloak and wrapped it tightly around herself and walked the long, cold path through the snow from her palace down to the boy's house. and rapped her knuckles on his door, ready to declare her love and to win his. This was no disguise. She had taken on this new identity as her own, that she might have him. You see, friends, that is the story of Christmas. That is the God of Christmas. The old theologians used to say, from heaven he came and sought her, speaking of the church, speaking of God's people, speaking of anyone who wanted to know him. God is the high sovereign who's fallen for us, the poor maiden, who at great pains for himself leaves his throne to come and win us. Our epistle reading spoke of it. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. Christmas is a love story. It's the expression of God's love that he comes to find us in the world. This is the Christian God. He's got an unhappy love, a love looking for resolution. Like the love in those old Christmas movies, an old flame forgotten, left in the past. It speaks of God's deep desire for us, not just his need of us or his use of us or his demands on us or his want for our allegiance, his want for us, which is ardent and strong as a lover's is. And he did not come to just a class of people, but he descended to the manger. He knocked on literally the lowest piece of wood he could find, to demonstrate there was no depth to the lowliness he would stoop to win his bride to himself. And there was no one beyond that love. It's this picture of God's love, this picture of God knocking on our door at Christmas, wanting to declare his love to us and win our love for himself. This is the love that stoops down to us at Christmas. It's the means by which so many Christians have found inspiration to love in the same manner, to lower themselves in the service of others, to take off the goods that they have to give to others, to meet the marginalized and the poor along the ways that others might forget, because that is the way of God's love in the world. As John said, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. So when you snuggle in front of your TV, perhaps tonight after this, I don't know, and you watch a Christmas movie, some of my friends watch Die Hard on Christmas Eve, maybe that's you. I want you to repeat to yourself, from heaven he came to seek her. From heaven he came to seek me. Because from heaven Jesus Christ came and stooped to become a baby who would die on the cross out of love for you, that you might know you're loved and that you might love him too. Amen.